How about Scott? How about you just kind of like open us up in prayer?
All right. Well, Father, we just thank you that each person can be here, and we're just real excited to see what specifically you want to do tonight. And I just praise you in advance for that in Jesus' name.
Yes. Amen.
Amen.
So I kind of just wanted to start off with like, there's a theme that God has been really hammering down on us as we've been starting to do these meetings here. Anyways, Julie, how about you kind of share just the thing that you kind of ran into?
Yeah, that one thing I will, because I was reading the book Boundaries, and it said if you wanted to have boundaries, you don't just jump in with your toughest problems. You start small.
Oh yeah, okay.
Really good advice.
Yeah.
Like, you let yourself heal. You have to be in a supportive community, and then you try. Okay. And I've had pretty good boundaries. There are some areas in my life that are scary for me to go into, and here's one. I have, every 6 weeks, I have a youth party for Meg and all of her friends, and I make it very special. So like, I will put on a full-on banquet or a dance party, whatever. This coming up next week, we're going to do a bonfire and fireworks, and this one time, one of the parents is asked to come to the party. Because the parent wanted to come and the husband with their kids, I said, no problem. So I invited the other parents, so you wouldn't want to be weird, right? You don't just invite one set of parents and all the other kids' parents. And so the parents said they were going to come, and they were after, what should we bring? And I said, please bring the drinks. That would be helpful. And then Scott saw the husband, and he said, oh yeah, it's my anniversary, I don't think I'm going to come. And so I just texted the mom, and I said, so are you not coming? And she said, no, I'm not coming. And so I could see that I was getting very angry inside, and I'll tell you why. Every single event I've planned, she didn't say she was going to come until the day before. And that wouldn't be a big deal, but there's only 5 kids, and she has 2 of them. And so I don't need to do the event if they don't come.
Yeah.
And one of them was her son's birthday, and I offered to take them water skiing and tubing. And I was planning for like a month and a half in advance, and I texted her, and she never responds until 3 weeks have passed. And so I just wait and wait and wait, and then like it puts me up. So like the last time was a Thanksgiving banquet, and I had to buy all the food the day before. I still didn't know if they were coming. I had to buy turkey and everything.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So I called her, and I don't have a relationship with this person. So I said, so you're not coming, that's fine, I just kind of want to talk it out because I think on my end, my heart's getting hurt.
Yeah.
And I said, every event I plan, you don't communicate with me, and you don't let me know until the moment before, and I actually have no idea what to do, and the other parents have asked me to let them know a month in advance because they're very, very busy. And I said, so I'm trying to work with you, and maybe you're the type of person who just does whatever you want, whenever you want, but I don't really know because I don't know you.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, I didn't know I was coming to this party. I said, well, your husband said he's bringing the drinks. Oh, I am coming. And then I said, you don't have to come, but if you could just tell me that you weren't and you couldn't bring the drinks, that would be helpful. And she said, well, I'm the type of person who I don't like to commit when that far out, because when I get there, I might back out because I have something else I have to do, so I just don't tell you anything because I might not do it anyways. And I said, well, okay, it's almost impossible for me to be able to do this then, because I'm kind of an introvert, and I'm being really brave with teenagers because I'm trying to create a positive atmosphere for them. I'm putting myself out, and I'm a vegetarian, and I'm baking turkey. I'm putting myself out there, being super brave, and I am scared. And I'm letting you know that this is really scary for me. And she goes, I would never do it. It's terrifying what you do. And I go, well, yes. And there's not one mother who's ever said, oh, I'll do it with you. So I do this alone. And I know I don't know you very well, but we've got to come to some kind of middle ground here. I said, I'm going to try to communicate better with you. That was my concession. And under her breath, she mumbled, well, maybe I'll try to plan it a little bit.
Would she? What?
Well, maybe I'll try to plan ahead a little bit. And it just like, it was like halfway there, And this is like the pastor of the community, it's his daughter-in-law. And it's, so like, we do everything with these people. And I was like, okay, I think we've made some progress, but what happened in my heart was that I've been doing these events all year with her, and I've been getting hurt every time.
Yeah.
And now, I don't feel angry anymore.
Yeah.
Because she knows that my heart was hurt. And whether she changes or not, that doesn't matter. I don't have to do the event again. If she doesn't want to come and judge on her kids, we don't have to do that. Well, at least she knows where I stand. And I think for me, it was super brave to have a conversation with somebody who's almost a stranger to me. And have to say, I don't really know you, but you're hurting my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's real good.
For me, that was really good. I know that's a baby step, but because we're having this conversation, you're like my support group. Really honestly, I'm sharing this with my support group because I have bigger things I have to face.
Oh yeah.
Right? So I keep forcing myself to practice small because I'm going to go big with my boundaries.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing I love about this story is I didn't realize this was going on for over a year, but so I'm going to read this passage in Leviticus. I came across this passage 2 years ago, and the Lord gave me a revelation with it, and I actually wrote it in my journal. I probably could have looked that up so I can actually read it, because there's a lot to it, but I'm only just reading the passage right now. In Leviticus chapter 19, there's a few scriptures here, and I'll just kind of read a little bit, but then I'll key on one spot that says, do not do injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor, defer to the great, but in righteousness shall you judge your neighbor. You shall not go around as a slanderer among your people. You shall not stand up against, and you shall not stand up against the life of your neighbor. I am the Lord. And then it says, you shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of it. And so that scripture right there where it says, lest you incur sin because of him. Well, I looked that up in like the Hebrew and everything and read a lot of commentary on it, but I felt like what the Lord was telling me is we make the mistake of sinning ourselves by holding things in. When people harm us, so like Julie, like for a year, it's like it was building up,
Because I didn't know her, so I was having more experiences as the year went on, right?
It's like a wound that just kept getting plugged. And I love the fact that you said when you finally said something and you had the conversation, then you felt great in your spirit. You felt great, yeah.
I wasn't angry anymore.
Yeah, and so that's a principle right there that we in the church are very bad about following through with, and it's a boundary issue. It really is. And in the New Testament, Jesus says the same thing. Basically, he says, if your brother sins against you, rebuke him. So he actually tells us to, go and rebuke him if he sins against you. But Leviticus, what it points out in Leviticus is like, you will incur sin upon yourself by holding it in. So it's like, don't incur sin because of what they're mistreating you, but don't allow that mistreatment to build bitterness in your heart, and then also have to judge you. And this turns into diseases over time. It can turn into cancer. I heard that sometimes certain cancers will manifest because of bitterness, And so that's what I think it's saying when it says don't incur sin upon yourself because of them. And so I shared this revelation with a friend right after I got it, and he kind of had to do the same thing. He had to call a guy who he had a friend. We're gonna.
Your mom actor? Who's coming up?
Oh, I see. Cool.
Okay, Ryan and Nathaniel, go ahead.
Yeah, so he called this guy up, and he kind of had to just tell him straight up how he felt, because this guy really made a promise and didn't fulfill. And he's like, man, I don't want to. He hardly knew the guy, but he called him up and just told him how he felt. He's like, it just made me feel this way, and the guy was just like, oh wow, yeah. And he kind of owned up his side of it. He's like, yeah, I guess you're right. I did let you down. I should not have done that. And then he just felt so much peace It's almost like a reward. You almost felt like God's reward for doing that, because by doing that, it actually offers the other guy, it wakes him up a little bit. Whenever we do those little things like that, and kind of keep people accountable a little bit, it actually gives them grace in a sense to realize, wow, I actually did kind of hurt someone, and I didn't even realize I was hurting them. And I should probably not do that in the future. And so when she mumbled to you under her breath, maybe I could plan a little better, you know, it kind of shows that it was getting through to her, and that she was realizing, yeah, this habit I've been doing, I should probably work on that, you know.
Yes.
It's hard for introverts to do that and call people.
Oh man,
Confront.
totally. I don't even like answering the phone. It's no joke.
In those kind of situations, the moment it happens, it's going to be the easiest time to deal with
To
it.
do it right then, I got up to the
Yes.
table, I went and did it right then, and Meg and Scott go, really? You're gonna do it? You know, that's so great!
Yeah. That is a good point. It is easiest to do it right away.
Right then.
Because you feel
Yeah.
kind of weird doing it a few days later.
Because everything's fresh right there. You can verbalize everything immediately.
Yeah.
If you give it time and time passes, you start to lose the trail.
Yeah.
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 You start to lose the trail,
You go down a
and
rock trail.
other things get involved. Then
Yeah.
it becomes more complicated.
Yeah.
Well,
So in the moment, it's the time.
is Julie showed herself, she showed vulnerability with
Yeah.
her.
Vulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's a woman who has a hard time, so maybe she even has a social anxiety behind
Yeah.
what she's
She
doing.
obviously has some things going on there.
Yeah, so her being vulnerable, saying, you know, I'm really putting myself out, and it's not me to do this, and so maybe it was a point for her to relate.
Right, and I wanted her to know that I was like her.
Yeah.
Like, I'm right like you, like, she goes, because when I had the birthday party for her son, she had such a hard time just buying the food for it, that her whole family praised her for buying the food. And she goes, oh, it's such a big deal, I bought these drinks, and she bought cupcakes and pre-made trays, you know, at Albertsons, which for her, that was huge. So I thought, for sure she can put herself in my shoes, right? I'm baking a turkey,
Yeah.
right? This is huge.
You know, it comes down to the small things. I just think, are we talking about boundary stories? So, I work with this temp co-worker. His name's Hunter. He's a great guy. I've been working with him about a year. And you know, when you first start working with somebody, that you always see the very best the first week or two.
Yeah.
You work with them long enough. I'm pretty easy on the people I work with. I tell them, like, you have something come up or whatever. And one day he started complaining about his knee at work, you know. And then a couple weeks later, it was happening again. I said, look, you know, did this happen the first time at work? Because at first he was squishy on it. I said, well, actually it did. I said, then we need to call, you know, the temp agency and let them know and start the claim process, you know. Because I said, what's happening is you come to work and you're all excited to work with me, and then it gets to be, we're way up the McKenzie River in the burn area. I have an excavator on rent, and he tells me at 1 o'clock, the excavator has to go back at the end of the day off rent, and his knee's hurting him again. And for a while, I just felt kind of bad, and I was taking a slack, and I said, look, I feel bad that your knee's hurt, but I said, you're not doing anything about it, and it's hurting me, and it's hurting you. I don't like that. It's not fair to either of us that this is going on. So I said, I'm telling you that you need to either, you know, you need to call the temp agency, or I'm going to, and let them know what happened. We gotta start the ball rolling so that you can get better. And he was like, okay, you know, because he knows we had another minor injury with him, but enough to, you know, he hurt his back on the job lifting something heavy, and he's got the social anxiety thing, so he hates confrontation. And late at that time had a meeting with us, you know, on the phone, or working with a crane, explaining how putting this part on hurt his back, and he's just like, I gotta take a smoke break after this, because it was so painful for him. She's like, how can this not happen again? What specifically are you gonna do? And he's just, you know, getting grilled kind of, right? And so anyway, that's all in the background. When he's hurt his knee later on, then we're having this discussion, and I had a boundary with him. Even though at first I was just tempted to feel bad and kind of coddle him along, right? And when I had a boundary with him, it didn't just happen once, because what happened is, I said, well, yeah, I'll call the temp agency. And so a couple days later, I said, did you call? Well, no, I haven't. So then I said, well, all right, I'm going to go ahead and email Todd. Well, I'll give him a call now. Okay, so then, even it's been going on like this for a while, and I found that it's really good to have those boundaries, because it keeps me from keeping on getting hurt. I want to plan that,
Yeah.
right? Because so sometimes I work with another guy as well, but if I show up and he's not able to work, and I plan on him being able to work, or he can only work half a day, and he means well, right? He wants to help, but he can't physically do it, then it just doesn't work, you know? But by defining the boundary and saying, so even today, again, he said, yeah, you know, I was supposed to have my MRI. I said, well, are you going to have it? Well, my doc said I don't know I need it. And I said, well, why? They said you needed it originally. Well, it's expensive. And I said, but didn't they say you needed it? He said, well, yeah, they did say that. So I said, well, what are we going to do then? If you don't know what's wrong with your knee, how can I know how to relate to you? Again, I'm having that boundary, right? Because if he's hurt, he needs to know what's wrong. So I said, would you please call and set up an MRI? And so we did, and they did that, you know, but it was, I guess, I'm just kind of, I don't know if I would have done that in the past, you know, but I'm hoping that there's some fruit there, because I'm trying to show him that I value him, right?
Yeah.
And that I really do need him. When he's going to be at work, I have an expectation that he's going to be at least 80% there. You know, I don't expect the person to be perfect all the time, but I do. There's a general, like, you know, efficiency and expertise you bring to a job, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's good to have that accountability in your work relationships and your familial relationships.
Yeah. You know, the unfortunate thing that can happen to people that don't learn how to have good boundaries, and I've been kind of learning this more recently, but like, if you don't learn how to have good boundaries, you will very, very likely marry someone that will not respect your boundaries at all.
That's what that book says, straight up.
Oh, really? The book says that? So I'm actually saying this because my friend, I should have a little bit. My friend reached out to me, Marco Polo, just yesterday, and she told me a lot of what happened in her life story. She married a pastor of a church that like 1,000 people in this church, but he was kind of like a behind the scenes, like a womanizer, very manipulative, very kind of evil to her. And this is like Texas area, Nebraska, or not Nebraska, but it's in the middle of the country. And she said the reason why she fell in love with him was because she grew up, well, she kind of grew up homeless. Like, she was homeless for a lot of her life. And just horrible family upbringing. But she was so used to thinking that's what love looked like. She thought she knew what love looked like, and it's like being abused all the time. And so she naturally was drawn to this guy who turned out to be a crazy abuser. And so if we tolerate being abused and not ever sticking up for ourselves, we will subconsciously attract those kind of people to be around us.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it's very a vicious cycle, you know?
I don't know why, and maybe you guys will agree or disagree with this, but I feel like boundaries issues, the prophetic types, by no means escape this. I feel like there are more boundaries issues almost that come up that are presented to prophetic types than others. I don't know. Julie, would you agree with that?
Maybe you can tell, John.
Yes.
Okay, what happens when a controlling, non-responsive person meets a compliant, avoidant person? They get married.
That's a good joke. That's good. Wow.
Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The first thing in all of this is the physical and the spiritual. The spiritual knows exactly where each one of us are. They know exactly what buttons to push. They know exactly what you're missing. They know what you have and they know what you're missing. And they get you come and push the buttons. The spirit realm in light and in darkness has the ability to put into your mind a thought. Period. They get to put into your mind a thought. And they get to watch you as you follow that thought. And as soon as you cross a certain point, you are in their control. In the spirit realm, for light and for darkness, they both watch you. They both listen, they watch. And you get to follow whichever one you want to choose. Now, for the abuser, it's easy for the abused to hook up with one who will abuse them, because in the spirit realm, they're connected already.
Right.
In the spirit realm, you're connected already to one who is an abuser, even if they have a facade that you can't see through. The spirit realm knows. So, if your spirit lifestyle is not balanced, one or the other is stronger. And if you turn it on wings, you're going to go to the side that's low. You're not going to go high when you tilt it against you. You won't. You can't. Aerodynamically, you can't go high when you tilt it low. You have to balance. Then that's how it has to come up. So it has to come up. It's either upward or downward. No ifs, ands, or buts. We get stuck in the middle ground that isn't even there. It's not supposed to be there. Our yea be yea, and our nay be nay. You know? So the weapon we have is the Word of God, which is meant for the vessel of God, the temple of God. The more you have to work with. The more you have to use against the enemy. But it must be the Word of God against the enemy, because nothing else will work against him. So we come to a place of, we're going to water each other. We're family. We're going to stand alongside each other. I'm going to gain strength from you. And you're going to gain strength from me. But we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder. But the Word of God must have preeminence in our lives. If it doesn't, we're tilted against it. Tilted against it, we're going to go downward. Because you can't go up when you're tilted down. You can't. It's not possible. You have to balance. There must be a balance. Then you start choosing the food that lasts forever. The living water, the Word, the blood, the bread. The whole thing is it's amazing how intricately connected all of this is.
I feel like what you mean when you say you're already connected in the spirit realm. Someone that's used to being abused, and then an abuser. You're almost attracted to each other like a magnet.
It's like
it is kind of true, and I
it's
feel
a
like
spirit connection, because the spirits know exactly
they
what
know.
it
And
is.
so I feel like one way I've heard it said is like your spirit will almost give off a certain signal if you tolerate abuse and predators that are out there that they're packing evil spirits and stuff, because they allow them in through open doors of sin and stuff like that. Those spirits can look at you if you're a victim, if you're a person that's easily a victim, and you tolerate it. It's like they know they can sniff you out, and so they'll draw those predators to you, and because you're so used to it, you've been born in it. And it's like all you know. Like speaking of a joke, Julie.
Yeah.
This is so funny what she said. I was like, yeah, that's really too bad. That man, he was a pastor of that big of church, and he treated you that way. I was like, well, that sucks. I was like, what drew you to him? And she's like, they came out. She's like, well, man. She's like, when you're born and swallowed immediately in a red flag, and you eat red flag for cereal, red flag cherries for cereal. When you ride your bus to school and it's a red flag bus, all this stuff. She's like, you really just don't have a chance. I was like, jeez. But yeah, so she just was, it's all she knew. And so even though he was an abuser, he really wasn't much different than what she was already used to.
On the streets.
Yeah.
The guy in the church.
Yeah.
But the same spirit as the people on the streets.
Yeah.
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 With that kind of balance being in power, what kind of congregation do you think he's gathering to himself? Only those like him. Only those like him. Because anything different is opposition. Direct right in his face.
Yeah.
He's not gonna seek the fellowship of that.
Yeah.
He won't.
Yeah.
That's not always how he's wired.
Yeah.
On the positive side, the opposite's true too, right? So if you have a spirit that, you carry good boundaries, then your friendships, your relationships eventually will mirror that as well, right? So that's the good news, right? So you might begin to, as you get healthier, it's probably pretty likely that Julie's not going to develop a deep friendship with this gal. But it's almost that she got saved from that.
Yeah.
So she can enter into a friendship and have the time
Yeah.
and bandwidth to enter into a relationship that does have good boundaries. So
Yeah.
as iron sharpens iron, so if you have the same kind of value system, the same spirit at work, it can be very positive, right? And maybe everybody's flying upward, as you say,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the hard part is, though, ironically in that, is there's a challenge implicit in making the transition, because let's say you've got 5 friends and you have boundaries issues with 3 of the 5. And you confront, you find out whether you really had that friend. Maybe the 3 of the 5 friends, only 2 of those 5 really are true friends. Because when you're truthful with them, when you're true, your spirits are true, you're telling you're vulnerable, you can be honest and say, that hurts when you do such and such. Could we change that? Then you find out the substance of your relationship or the lack thereof, And so sometimes you might end up going down to just 2 friends for a while, and that's hard because you're basically saying, I value myself enough to potentially let go of what I thought was a friendship. They give an example in the book, the Boundaries book, that the author, one of them, that this lady keeps calling her friend. Let's say Joan calls Alice, and Alice is always the one listening to Joan's problems, right? And so one day, Alice, after having some breakthrough in the area of boundaries, she gets this call from Joan, and she says, oh man, I'm having a crisis again. And Alice says, well, every time you call, we're having a crisis. So I'm going to call you just to say hi later and see if it can go both ways. And she found out soon, by doing so, that really Joan was just going down through the list, and whoever would answer the phone, and she would unload on and tell her her latest crisis.
Oh, yeah.
She was just getting used every time. They had no real friendship. And then that was really painful for her to realize, in a sense, like, I dumped all this time, all this energy in this relationship that I never really had.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's free now to pursue a friendship a relationship that does have meaning.
Yeah.
I think that's a challenge for all of us to really ask yourself, like, your time is so limited, your resources, right? Are you pouring it into those that matter?
Yeah.
Or if you really were honest with yourself, like, are you being true? Are you being, is there a veracity in your relationships that matters? And I think that for me is a challenge, because sometimes I have to go, even with my dad, I was telling him, I don't tell him the truth a lot, so I told him the truth, and I kind of cut that one off a little bit in that particular case, from going down this route. But it's a challenge because you open yourself up to the reality. You might be lonelier than when you started for a while. I think that's where I'm really going with this.
Yeah. But the cool thing is, though, that I've seen God do in my life is when I be obedient to kind of have healthy boundaries and try to call people up higher that have sort of been really taking advantage of our friendship, And when I do that, God will, like, sometimes they'll get offended and they'll be like, okay, well, I guess we're done. Like, they'll come against you or whatever. But God, for me in my life, it's like He has always rewarded me for doing that by connecting me. All of a sudden, it's like He'll open a door and He'll connect me with like a brand new, like, honestly, when I got my job, it was that. Like, it wasn't until I had to put up some healthy boundaries with 3 people that were big people in my life. And I kind of had to, like, almost And I told him straight up kind of what I felt that they were abusing me and manipulating me in a certain way. But after doing that, now it's hard, Scott, because that was like, the fear of just being alone for a while.
Yeah.
That was really gripping me. But it was like right after I did that, my boss Wayne randomly calls me up. Only a couple weeks after that, he's like, "Hey, you want to work for me?" And then that introduced me to a whole new group of people. Like that, and just the friends I work with now, like my coworkers are pretty awesome friends. All the people that come into the shop and then even just my boss himself and his family. Gosh, like God totally like opened up this whole new realm of acquaintances and stuff, and I'm able to be a blessing to their life. And like my buddy Kellen, he came to church and got saved. He got saved after a conversation we had at work, and then even my buddy Trent, the Lord's used me to bless him some, and so
there's a grace there because you were obedient.
Yeah.
It's like Joe was telling me when he came in, he had a teaching opportunity a while back that would have potentially really been a door opener. Like having these teaching opportunities is really important in academia. But he felt like he should say no because it was just too much for that time period. And then later he got a better teaching opportunity that paid, and he felt the yes for that. But there was a grace for that one. Yeah. And sometimes I'll find myself like, I don't know if you guys have experienced this when you're in that grace zone and you're like, man, there's this favor for that, and then we probably all experience it when we're outside of that.
Yeah.
Like this happens to me, when a job all of a sudden, like I underbid it, and I get there and I'm like, oh man, that's really a lot more tree than I thought it was. Or then I think about, the whatever, the dog shed that's there now that wasn't there before, and it's just, you want to be in, if you're doing what God has set aside for you to do, there will be a grace for it. If you're doing it in your own strength, in your own way, outside of, and that's outside of the boundary. With kids, we call it being outside the parenting funnel. Yeah. But we're no different, right? As being God's children, if we're outside that funnel, that's a scary place to be because you're just doing what the world does then. But if you're inside His yes, which is sometimes a no to things, right? Then you're good to go. And these boundaries, they're not always with other people, right? That we set up. Sometimes they're within ourselves in a sense. Like you're going to set a boundary on how you spend your time, or whatever. It's there's all kinds of, they go every which way. Physical, emotional, spiritual kinds of boundaries with others and ourselves. So.
In those scenarios like Julie was talking about, the lady in the parties, and this reminds me of speaking the truth in love.
Yeah.
Tell the truth in love, or whatever that is, and however that comes out. But I think, anyway, it just reminds me of that.
Rick told me, Scott and Julie, when you guys had to stick up for yourself when you were down there with family.
Yeah.
The first thing he said to me on the phone when I told him kind of how it went was he just kind of said, well, he's like, they're going to have payoff in the long run for doing that. Like, for do you remember kind of saying that to me? You're like, well, there will be payoff, like benefit for you guys sticking up for yourself and having healthy boundaries, even though it's hard to do it.
When you feel foolish and you feel like you're creating a mess in that case, and it wasn't particularly glamorous at all. Just like trench warfare,
Yeah.
And people they're not necessarily going to hear you at all. You know what I mean? They may disagree with you, or.
What's interesting though is that when you're having boundaries, if you're a person who's in a relationship with other people, you're taking other people through your boundary issues. So I was sitting on the bed when I was at my parents' house and it wasn't going well. And I said to Meg, forgive me for bringing you here. And she said, how did you know I was thinking that? So I had a mess, and I was making a mess on other people.
Yeah.
And she goes, how why would you come here? You know? And then listening to her, and I'm like, well, you're right. You know, she goes, Mom, every day's literally a week. And I was talking about it this way. She goes, Mom, those were the longest days of my life. I mean, they felt like a week, but for me, it was like a month. I actually thought a day would never end. And I just see her cringing, like, I know.
Wow, that's so true.
But the cool thing was you learned a big lesson. You shared it, I think, when most people had left at the last meeting. But you realized you had that
briefly, I
career
learned one lesson, you guys. It's just, only Holy Spirit could take me there to teach it to me, but we were about ready to get to a safe place where maybe we packed our bags and went to a city park because it was getting unsafe in the home. And I told the kids that depending on how our conversation went with Grandma and Grandpa, that they needed to pack their backpacks. We only had 2 suitcases and we were going to start walking because we couldn't actually rent a car to leave. There was no rental cars that would fit 8 people. And so we went in to have the conversation, and as I was there, my mom told me that I needed to look her in the eye. So I took my glasses off because I can't see you when I do that. And the only thing that really happened was that before I went, I had sent a text asking for a boundary in a certain area. And when I was having the conversation, the kids were in the room with my parents and we were talking this out. They told me I should have never sent the text. And the text was to have a boundary.
Yeah.
So when I went to bed that night, for some reason I was sniffling, and I don't cry very often, but Scott said, "Are you crying?" And I was like, oh, I just feel terrible inside. And he goes, "Why do you feel bad?" And I didn't really know why I felt bad. So he handed me the last chapter of the Boundaries book, and it was about guilt. And it said that when you're a child, you experience certain messages, but that parental voice can be in your mind as an adult. And as I was in my bed, I could hear my mind had a voice in it. And it was telling me all the things that I do wrong, and how I mess up, and how I'm such a mess up with my parents, and the whole problem is my fault, and if I just would behave myself, things would be okay. Can you imagine? This voice was so strong in my head that I actually thought in the end I was strong.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. I turned to Scott and I said, I have a voice in my head, and it makes me feel guilty. So like before you guys came here today, I laughed at the Lord. I was walking through the hallway and I was laughing because I said, oh, got that voice in my head, and I was feeling bad. Like I could hear my parents in my head all day long.
Oh wow.
It's almost like my face turns beet red because somebody's talking to me about sex.
Oh,
That's that feeling I get, like, oh, God, we're talking about this. Okay? And so, in the book it said, you need to get other voices. And I was like, yeah, I gotta get other voices in my head. And it said you could only get other voices by other people speaking into you.
Yeah.
Right? And this is not my fault. I did not ask for these voices in my head, right? But I never knew they were there.
Oh. You thought it was the Holy Spirit.
Probably. Or I had some deep conscious things I was always feeling so bad.
Well, you were agreeing with for a while.
I agreed because I don't think I actually agreed with him, but my guilt did.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And it was unfortunately a very intense situation. Like Abby wanted to speak up in the meeting, and she said to me later, she goes, every time I tried to talk, there was a wall between the good words and the bad words.
Oh wow.
And she's 9. And so they were all suffering. They all had things they wanted to say. And it was painful for all the kids. And the kids live in a relatively healthy environment where everybody loves them. And I wouldn't say that my parents don't love them. I would say that my parents don't know how to love them in a healthy way. Yeah, that's what happened. And I think that those boundaries there, I was setting them and they weren't working.
Yeah.
So that's why I need help.
They weren't
Because it's
accepting
one
it.
thing to set a boundary, but somebody can just step on it again.
Yeah.
You can say it, but people just run you over.
You gotta have a plan for when that happens.
You
Right?
do.
Yeah, you gotta have a plan, and it's about protecting your unit, right?
Your property.
Your property.
Yeah.
Because God's given us authority over our own kids, and the health of our spiritual health of our family.
That's right.
And I think it's the hardest with families to set boundaries with, because they're in your life for in and out all forever. You know, technically to some degree, but it's about the health of your family. Like, if it's a person that's related to you, if it's a friend of a friend, no matter what, if they're stopping on your boundary, if they're, I call it a toxic person,
Yes.
then you gotta have that boundary and stick to it. Or else you're gonna suffer, your kids will suffer. Like, and it's not being mean. Like, it's just, you have to know how it feels and what's happening and be sensitive and how it's affecting everyone.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And in our lives, we have
And
very
a lot of
limited-
people, a lot of moms don't know how to do that.
Yeah, but like I have very limited contact with people other than the group. But I asked to ask the Lord why I wasn't having boundaries with these people, my parents. And I had to ask why. And the answer was kind of deep. He said to me, because you don't want to lose your father.
Oh, wow.
And so those things you don't know unless you're going into inner healing, right?
But you gotta realize, you're choosing your father who doesn't deserve what you want to put up with, just so you can have that relationship. You're kind of choosing your father over your kids.
Yeah.
You know, when you really look at it in that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't deserve, like, even if you did choose him, it's probably not going to benefit him that much.
I don't think there's a lot of benefit there. I think it's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
That's hard to say. So when I came back, I think I've just been in a grieving process, just kind of just grieving that I don't really have parents.
Yeah.
There's a place in all of this too, when you find it in the Word. It's called the seared conscience.
Yeah.
When you have a seared conscience, you can't pray for yourself. You can't, because you don't know how.
Yeah.
And when you encounter those with a seared conscience, it's up to us to pray for them. We can do that. And that's what we're called to do, is to pray for them. Because in the spirit realm, everything travels telepathically. It's a thought in the spirit realm. In the physical realm, it's sound. It's words. It's what we speak. It's what we hear. The word was designed for this temple to be spoken. Period. That word belongs in here. The word became flesh, which is Jesus Christ. It belongs in here. This is what changes us and makes us different from them, because they don't have it. They don't have it. So it's even more in that responsibility to shoulder up, shoulder together, and look together, and let us wait for a word from Him for them, that we can pray, that we can actively engage in by speaking something that lives into something that is dead. That's another form of coming out of the grave. It's another form. And if we fail in that, what else are we going to fail in? We'll fail even in our own stuff. But He calls us to be servants. Servanthood is the highest gift. Honor to honor is the highest regard. Because we have sound, we do get to speak that which lives into every situation. Every situation. There's not a situation we're going to ever encounter which we cannot speak into. If not spoken, then sing. If not spoken, sung, make a frequency. Make a sound of life that's coming from a place within that has been broken, so it can come together and be put out there to something that lives. We got no guarantees in it, but we do have a guarantee in who Yeshua is, and who His Word is, and who the Holy Spirit is, and the blood and bread of communion. We have those guarantees. Those are ours and belong to us. And the more we honor Him in it, the more He's going to do is what we've given to Him. Because He said, so shall my word be that comes forth out of my mouth, your mouth, into the place whereto I send it. It will prosper. No weapon formed against us will prosper. But if we stand in a constant place of defeat, all we're going to look at is our feet. That's all we're going to see.
I was asking the Lord about, like, why boundaries are so, because I guess when we started doing meetings up here, that was the main thing that they were battling with boundaries, even with their neighbor and just a lot of stuff. I was going through a lot of stuff where God just kept hammering boundaries with me, and same with Anita. She was going through whole things with boundaries with her business. And And God had been speaking to all three of us about boundaries, and I'm like, well, what's the deal with boundaries? And why is it like so important to you? You know, and even one of the curses listed in generation in Deuteronomy 18 was a curse for those who try to move boundary marks. You know, and but so what the Lord finally said to me one day, He said, because my yoke is easy, my burden is light, and the church has a heavy, heavy yoke on it because they won't walk in the wisdom of having boundaries. And so our yokes aren't easy, and our burden isn't light, because we try to save we try to take on a savior mentality. We try to save all our family. When Jesus said, no, I come to bring a sword that will even divide family. Like sister against mother, brother against father. Like, we're not supposed to, like, just because we become saved and stuff, it doesn't mean it's our responsibility to like get our whole family saved and then work out from there. It doesn't really work that way. Usually God will actually save you out of your family, take you away from your family for a season, get you healed up, walking in the Spirit, and then once you're able to rest in God and walk in the Spirit, then He will send you back to help family members, but not always. He will sometimes send you out, mission fields, whatever, you'll be doing other things. And then 10 years later, He might send you back to your family to speak a word of wisdom that might capture their heart. But boundaries is such I think it's one of the biggest areas that the church is taken advantage of by Satan. And we get this savior mentality, a false responsibility, and that's why we're really ineffective. You know, because it's just a heavy, heavy yoke.
I always think of it as there's a lot of good you can do, but what is God really wanting you to do?
Yeah.
Because you know, like I see people just out there just doing so much good in churches, a lot of good. They're all very busy. I wonder if it comes to any saving good. Because sometimes, like if I just give you an example, if I have a boundary on myself, I'll just wait on the Lord. I don't actually be doing anything. But if I wait long enough, one time I was driving a car and I heard, well, just call this person and share this with them. Oh man, I was just sitting on my bed praying for you to call me. I can't believe you shared that. And then it was a pivotal moment in that person's life that changed their life forever. But I could have done a lot of good things during that time, but I only did that one thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it helps me to remember those times so that I don't get trapped in that cycle of, oh, so-and-so's going to go off and do this for this, or they're going to go pray over here, or whatever. You have to ask yourself, is that for you?
It's much harder in the church, really, honestly, because there are so many good things, right? But it's just like going through a buffet line where you've got 100 things, maybe, and they're all looking good, but your plate's only this big. I mean,
it's a very good point.
Because it's going to get full.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody has their limit. And some people, they might be carrying around a bigger plate than you. That may, you know what I mean? Julie can probably carry on more than I can in a day, honestly. So my plate's a little smaller. So it's so you don't want to compare yourself to the next person because they might have more capacity or they might have less. I remember this girl in Kansas City, and she was overwhelmed because she started working at Home Depot part-time. That's all she did, she stayed at home, but that's all she could handle. And I don't make fun of her for it, you know what I mean? Whereas her husband was managing a hospital basically, and he had compassion on her, you know, he didn't like look down on that. And we all have our zones that we operate in, and so, but I think within the church though, it is a higher calling really to ask what's good and what's God, you know? And then I think as we relate to the secular world, it's still a challenge sometimes because, for example, we've had issues over this boundary issue, the property line, a literal physical boundary in this case, for years, and we always. And I think there's always a place for Christian.
It's all made up, just in your head.
Huh?
It's all made up, just in your head. The boundary issue. The boundary was always there, but we had it in our head.
Right, and so, but we tried to be so loving, and we tried to be so accommodating, and they would step on us, and finally we stopped doing that. And Susie, I think, bottom line, she said, you know, so much of what we do is coddling demons and calling it Christianity. And we're just like keeping the demons that's happening.
Yeah.
Finally, we just said, we're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
We tried so hard, and every time we bend over backwards, you push us a little more until we're just steamroll, and it doesn't work. So, yeah. Anyway, it's
Okay, now, we got something. You sit down.
all right.
You? Okay. Servanthood is the highest gift. Period. Out of all the gifts, servanthood is the highest. One is stationary. The other one is in motion. Shalom. Shalom. Shalom.
Is this Christmas? Oh, wow.
Oh, nice.
Oh wow, this is great.
Wow.
This is for foot washing, right?
Nice.
Wow.
Servanthood
Amazing.
is the highest gift.
And you guys
And
are,
it's the one that's the most hardest to do.
yeah.
But it's what he called us to do. He even gave an example. We are servants first, and we should be with each other.
That gift is even like, it just matches you guys so well.
Yeah.
Just with like a lot of the dreams the Lord gives you about cleaning and helping people and washing them up. And so I just love that.
Yeah. In Scott and I's dreams, we always are cleaning up, not that this is this, but we always clean up people's poop. And that's what we do. So, we know it. We get in dirty situations.
I love that.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing is, none of this is supposed to be heavy. Where people are messy, relationships are messy. And Jesus, he
Knew that.
He knew that, and he didn't sidestep that. It's just
I think part of my dream that I think I sometimes you're in something and you don't really know what you do or why you're in it. But one of the things I found along the way was one of the things I do is I stand back and I'm in situations, but it's usually with leaders of things. And I was always having conversation in those areas, but it was really because I was just cleaning up some poop in an area. Does that make sense? And you can get confused about who you are or what you do, but when you're a servant to wherever he sends you. You really are, whatever it looks like. And when I had this one dream, I was in this bathroom with Scott, I only had 2 bathroom stalls, and there's poop all over the wall and everything. We were just cleaning, and he comes to me running with this baby, and the baby's just poop all over him. I go, I got the baby, and I'm cleaning the baby up, He keeps cleaning the bathroom, and I come back and I'm helping. The bathroom becomes this beautiful cedar building. And it just has 2, almost like doctor beds, but they have their cedar siding, dark, and it has an orange leather cover on the bed part. And there are leaders lined up outside the door to come in. And the leader that's in the building with me, his name is Tim Elmore. Tim Elmore does research on leadership for youth and young people in America. And he writes about it every day of his life. And he's in his 60s or 70s. His life work is how to grow a leader. And he's in there. In this place that used to be full of poop. He's a guy that grows leaders. And I'm just talking, all leaders are letting him out, but obviously it was a place of intimacy. One-on-one. And that's how you just you get to know somebody, right? That's how you change their life. You get to know them. And that's what he was modeling. You know people. When you serve them, you've got to know them. Got to know them. And you can't be known unless you're vulnerable back. So you can't grow unless you're willing to grow back. That's what being a friend is.
That's the other side of boundaries. It's not always putting up a wall. It's knowing the right time to not have a boundary. You know, that sounds like, well, wait a minute, no, there are good boundaries, but there are also bad boundaries against good things.
Yeah.
You know, and we have to be careful there to like, people that you do trust, to let them into your life, to speak into your life.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah, because like if you don't have healthy boundaries, it will never allow the relationship to really bear fruit.
Mm-hmm.
It will become a codependent relationship.
Right.
And I've wasted years with friends and even mentors of mine who my discernment was kicking in. It's like, you know, when I'm talking with them on the phone and stuff, it's like they don't really allow me to talk that much.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I do try to if I try to say something, they will, like sometimes they'll even mention like, oh, you interrupted me. Like, but it's like my discernment was picking up just like little stuff, and I knew it was there, but I had no idea how much I was wasting my time. And so when the relationship did finally come to an end, I felt like I wasted 2 or 3 years of my life with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And the person, I think someone said it tonight, like the person was using me as just a vessel just to pour out all their stuff on, you know, all their emotion, a release, like, oh, maybe will hear me out. And yeah, there was many times I'll be on the phone for like an hour and barely got a few words in, and
Right, they don't care they're not having a dialogue, they're having a therapy session.
And I thought, well, at least I helped him. I used to think, oh, at least I gave them some time and they'll grow. But no, I really wasn't allowing them to grow.
No.
Yeah. I was enabling, you know.
I've been in those situations too, where I've been on the phone with somebody, and just kind of spilling out their whole life to me, and it's kind of like a therapy kind of thing. And it's amongst people who are not believers and believers, so it kind of goes both ways. So that can be really challenging.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Anyone else got any kind of like examples of how having a boundary issue and sticking up for yourself, how it brought like peace for yourself or breakthrough in some way, or the cool?
Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say this real quick. The cool thing about you sticking up for yourself with that lady just was that today?
It was a couple days ago.
A couple days ago. The cool thing about that is not only do you feel better about yourself, less heaviness, all that stuff, who knows what can happen with it. Like, she may, you know, realize and feel convicted, and it can now open the door for you guys to actually have a much healthier relationship down the road, possibly, you know.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, and if you never would have spoken up, by a year from now, you could have been really frustrated, and you know, that passive
You can't really
aggressive.
fake it, because whether you vocalize or not, spiritually speaking, as he was saying, your spirits know, but also just on a human level, if you've got a beef with somebody, you may never talk about it, but you both know it's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And so by just getting out in the open, you know, at least you have a starting point to go somewhere. So it's the most loving thing to do. I mean, this is all in the context of servanthood, right? Where we're serving each other, but the loving thing to do is to call each other higher, not just to, if you really care about someone, you'll bless them with the opportunity to grow. Not that it's your job to teach and correct every single person out there, I don't mean that, but if you're willing to do what the Lord asks and to hold each other accountable and be honest, that is hard. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. I mean, no, when you were saying that though, I'm thinking, wait, that sounds. Anyway, the other night at a worship time, I felt like the Lord was saying, let go of fear and receive joy. You can't have fear and have joy at the same time. Fear blocks joy. So, I mean, you know, it's just their opposite, or they're totally, and so it was like, so I felt like, okay, let go of fear and receive joy.
Chris Valentine, he said, you know, what would he challenged in one of his sermons? He said, what would you do if you were 10 times bolder? What's the thing that's before you that you would not even trifle about taking on if you were 10 times bolder? I thought it was a good.
Well, when you other side of the Jordan, I would say that was the other side of the Jordan. When Scott and I were on the other side of the Jordan, down there, we were sleeping in sleeping bags, and he would say to me, oh, we're camping outside the promised land. And when he listened to that sermon, he said, Julie, what would you do if you were 10 times bolder? And then I was quiet, and he was quiet, but we both knew. And we said to each other, well, we put that heating system in the log house. And that was scary.
It was.
We had to call Comfort Flow and say we put it in, and it was like $28,000 or something. And that was so scary. And it pressed on a wound we both had, and when they came up the stairs, the guy was standing in here, and he's like, okay, we'll be here on Monday.
Is that okay? And I was like, okay. You know what I mean? What do you say?
Were you guys kind of doing it by faith without even having the funds?
We didn't have any money for it.
We had.
No, he said we'll be here on Monday, and it was $20,000, and we were both like.
They weren't gonna do it all in a day. You know what I mean? It was gonna take some time.
It
But
was gonna be a
still.
couple weeks.
Yeah. So I mean.
It went for Scott and I. We had come off of building the driveway without funds, and it was $90,000, and we didn't have the money for that for 8 months.
Yeah.
So we were really raw, and we were having to have faith in an area where we had a wound. And I won't tell you how it worked out, but it did.
But yeah, just to give context for that, they had a promise from the Lord that this place will be finished at a certain time.
By Christmas.
And and so.
And we started in November without floors, trim, doors, nothing, no heating, nothing, no cabinets, nothing. It was just the walls.
But I would say there's not a rule here. You really need to hear the Lord for yourself on this. But a lot of time, because you don't want to live beyond your means. That's not wise counsel. And so many times the Lord will have us seemingly do that very thing where it's a stretch, you know, to commit to do something that feels scary. Maybe it's not just financially, but it's not uncommon, I'm just saying, you know, and you can tell when you get that feeling in your stomach, and it's not the same as where you have the enemy hits you with fear. The Lord doesn't sucker punch you like that, but you know that it's going to be a challenge. It's a voluntary trial that you enter into. There's lots of different kinds of things we face, but sometimes you have the choice to enter into that trial. And like when you're going, okay, Lord, do you want us to go forward with that? And maybe it's choosing to be a missionary somewhere, where you really have choice in that.
Right.
But in a sense,
you want to live. You want to really live.
Yeah, do you really want to live? Yeah. Do you really want to see what the Lord, you know, because you want to see what's possible.
Yeah.
Right?
When you guys went forward with that and you said, okay, we'll do it, and they said, okay, we'll be here on Monday, what did it feel like?
Oh, it felt terrible! I'm not gonna lie to you. Oh! It was every day, it was like hell! And I'm not, like, God doesn't, like, make it soft inside of me. Like, I remember I got a flu when it was happening. Like the hinds came over in the boxes, and all the kids were traveling around. I was getting mud everywhere, and I was getting sick. And all I could say was, "I'm martyring myself."
Yeah.
But Nate,
that's what it felt like.
It goes on like right now, and I'm not going to go into details, but in work it's the same way. Where and it doesn't happen just like I don't just call them, okay, let's buy that thing. But we've been talking about doing this for a long time, and I ordered this part, and it's $25,000. I put down a deposit. The rest is due when the thing is done, and they can't custom made for my truck in the Netherlands. Well, that's kind of scary. So I have to sell a truck in the meantime, and everything else. And I didn't just one day say, Julie, should we do this? And let's just, it was like we prayed about it. We asked for witnesses, whatever. But you still have to move forward.
But he's still doing it, and I can be honest. But he's still has wounds in the area of money.
It's hard. Yeah.
And today we had this funny joke where I told him, stop it. And he's trying to tell me about something on his truck. I go, you just need counseling. We're just having this banter, right? We're in this financial stress all the time, and then yet we still have wounds, and we're like getting through it. It's sturdy.
I mean, faith looks like something, right? I mean, actually, it looks like your stomach's going to churn.
Oh.
It's just encouraging you to face your giants, and I mean, David really did have to pick up that stone. It seemed absolutely asinine, right? And run towards a giant.
Yeah.
That is the kind of
No, but they've been staying there for like 40 days.
Yeah.
And that had been going on for when nobody would do it. You know, can you imagine when nobody would do it, but you're the little guy?
He has one, really, I mean, I don't know what.
But he had practiced. That's what kept coming to my mind, is that he had practiced. Because he always did that with the lions or the wolves or whatever came to his flock, right? Because he was a shepherd.
But he practiced spiritually too.
He practiced, but yes, but he knew how to, but he knew God would do it.
Yeah.
He'd been in those situations in another context, and it could apply to that context somehow. You get me?
So this all comes together because we face our giants, and sometimes the biggest giants we face are these boundary issues that we've had, maybe in their family relationships for so many years.
Yeah.
And like I have them in my family, we're discovering, you know, and it's like, man, I mean, these are opportunities. They're giants that can be slain. You know, and everybody wins in that case. Even if it hurts, it doesn't cause harm. There's a difference, right? And so these are tremendous opportunities, but they don't come easy. Relational, I mean, the stuff, paying for an eating system is relatively easy compared to dealing with relational issues.
I think I just realized this thing I just dealt with just today with my brother and calling him out in front of the family like that. I just had a dream like about a week ago. I was at my sister's house, and I think that's where they're going to go. They were going to go and do dinner at my sister's tomorrow, but they changed it to my brother Joe's house just today. But I had a dream I was at my sister's house hanging out with like some family and stuff, and all of a sudden there was a bear outside, and I had to wrestle the bear. I was choking out the bear with my arm.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm choking this bear, and someone was helping me. I don't know who it was. They were kind of wrestling the bear to the ground. But I'm on this thing, and I had no weapons. I had no gun, so I'm like, crap, I just have to choke it. And so I'm like,
Just had to choke.
yeah, so I had a big head. It was a blonde colored bear. And I'm just like, as hard as I can, I'm just squeezing and just choking it with everything I had. And in the dream, at the very, you know what? The bear actually had its mouth open. It kept trying to open its mouth and bite me. And I grabbed a big rock and I shoved the rock in the mouth. And so it's biting on the rock. And it's like its mouth is like kind of, he can't really open his mouth anymore because the rock was like, I shared the dream with a friend and she's like, Nate, that's the truth of God. Like Jesus is the rock and you're shoving truth in his mouth. So he can't bite you. He can't bite you, so the truth.
I love it.
And I was like, okay, that fits. But I'm choking it out and then it dies. I actually did kill it.
Wow.
I choked out and it died in the dream. And so I was like, okay, well, this is gotta be a big dream. I didn't know what it was pointing to. But I kind of wonder if maybe me dealing with this demon in my family
Yes.
and confronting it, because it was at my sister's house. And that's usually where we go when we have family dinners. And so maybe that's part of what that might mean.
Your confidence, okay? Your confidence increases when he meets you in whatever situation you're facing. Your confidence increases.
That's right.
You gain confidence, which also means that you now have authority in that very situation. Stop and think about the hard situations that you faced in life, that you came through, and you know it was him. As after you got through it, you look back, you know it was him, because nothing else could have happened without him. It wouldn't have done it. You have authority in that situation to speak the life into it. Because you've been through it, you have that experience. You've been through it and you get to speak into it, his word of life into that. Wherever you go, whatever situation you have, whatever you encounter, you get to speak his word by his spirit through the blood of Yeshua. And that's power that the enemy has nothing against.
His word.
Nothing. You have that authority. Choke out the bear. Huh? You didn't call for that, but that's what he gave you. The act that the very fact that you would even see that thing and go out and realize you got nothing else, you're gonna choke it to death because you're done.
Yeah.
You know, because you're done.
Yeah.
And he made you for that moment, not once, but again and again, because you're stepping into who he created you to be. You get to speak his word in every situation. You get to see it live.
Yeah.
You get to see it prosper, and it'll prosper in you too. And the other side of that coin is honoring each other.
Yeah.
The more the husband honors the wife, the more the wife honors the husband.
Yes.
When there's honor like that, it builds together, not separately. It's together. It becomes a threefold cord because of the Holy Spirit. Strong example of strength, valor, vigor.
Yes.
Because you get to walk into the land and be that light. We have a confidence that we've yet to walk into and exercise the roar of the Lion of the tribe of Judah in any given situation. We don't know what it'll be or when or where, but we know that because we belong to Him, there's something that He's going to exercise through you wherever you are. If you let Him, He will. If you ask Him, He will, because He wants to do something that's so far above anything and everything we've ever experienced. We're being prepared for that moment. It's a holy place. Boy, He gets to do something when we walk in His authority. Because of what He's done through us already. Amazing God. He's an amazing God. How loud the song, how loud the shout. It's one of triumph.
Nate, I feel like I have something for you. I feel like God has given you, I think, like authority in your family that your father never knew what to do with.
Yes.
So I feel like, I mean, there's tons of examples in the Bible where God's looking for someone to give this authority to, and this person is not ready or they're not suitable, but he wants to give it to them, and it doesn't work. So He looks for somebody else, and he deposits it into their spirit because they're ripe, they're ready to take that on, and they've had that maturity, that time to mature. I feel like your dad never had that maturity time. Something happened and it just didn't happen in his life, and he's just going to use that in your family, and it's not going to be in vain. It's going to be a healthy thing, even though it may seem like it's chaotic. But I mean, you're that safe boat for your family, and you gotta protect that.
You know, God does make you bold, because I think you said that. Because I mean, my brother, he called me on the phone and he was just yelling, cussing, and he's a big guy. He's tough. He's the toughest one in my family. When he was a ninth grader, he could bench 300 pounds when he was in 8th grade. 300 pounds. A spirit of anger, a spirit of rage and anger came into him when he was, I think, 10. He told me. He's like, he even remembers when it came in. Like one day I was telling him, someone had a prophetic word for you, and they shared it with me. And they said like a spirit of rage came into you when you were younger because you got hurt. And he's like, did you? I said, yeah, I actually know when that was. And he got in a fight, and this spirit came into him, and I think that's the reason he got so big, because he enjoyed having the power of that spirit, you know? And anyway, so I can hear that spirit yelling at me through him today on the phone. And I just didn't really get fearful at all, and I just told him straight out, he's wrong, and every time he tried to counter me with some stupid way of twisting the scripture, I didn't have, you know. But I was always surprised though to see my family be so cowardly. Like my one brother, he calls me up and he's like afraid. He's like, hey, you shouldn't have done that. And he might try to come kill me. And I'm like, well, if he does, just pray for the angels to protect you, put a border around you. If he comes at you, just rebuke him in the name of Jesus. And you know, God, who knows? God will stick up for you. Just have faith in that. And he's like, well, okay. But yeah, I almost wonder if it's because of the demonic spirit that's in my brother, if it is the powerful spirit, and people in my family that aren't really walking in the Lord and walking in the Spirit, it like has power over them.
Yeah.
You know? And I was wondering if a little bit if that might be what you were doing with your mom.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thought when you were talking. That spirit must be there, you know.
Which makes sense when people have demonic spirits like that. That's probably why that gripping fear can hit you, because it seems like it's hitting other people in my family right now. It's not really affecting me right now, just because God's giving me boldness and stuff. But
So, there's been a lot of things that have been shared tonight that I've really kind of noticed. There's, I'm sorry, I had a thought of like what I was going to say to follow up what you've been saying, but it kind of just escaped me, but that's okay.
That's cool.
So there's been, earlier you shared from Leviticus 19, and this, I think I've shared this with most of y'all. I'm in a biblical studies program at Asbury Seminary in Kentucky, and this semester I've been studying the book of James, and particular one verse or two verses in the book of James. But James, there's a series of references to that passage and throughout the book of James. And if you would have read, I think the next verse from where you stopped, I think was the love command.
Okay.
You shall love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
Which of course is central to Jesus' teaching, and James is Jesus' brother, which I believe it was. You know, like it's a family similarity in their instruction.
Yeah.
But just coming back around to the topic of boundaries, I've certainly had to enact and enforce boundaries many times, and with family and friends, and I think that now I'm reminded of what I was going to share. I think that this is so hard with our families because those spirits, the demonic spirits, what is the term? They gaslight you, you know?
Yeah, gaslighting, yeah.
They make, which I didn't know what that word means. I'm in a doctoral program, and I'm like, somebody explain what this word means. I don't understand it. And they said it's when they make it out like it's you're the problem.
Yeah.
Like
Always mine.
Yeah.
I'm always the problem.
Yeah, and that's what happened to me too.
Okay.
And that's those spirits. And so when somebody decides to take a stand, those spirits turn on them, and there's all this pressure because there's accusation. The spirits are liars and they're accusers. So there's this accusation that you're not being faithful to your family, you're not living up to your obligations and everything. So for me, boundaries have been very important. And there was a season when I was, I don't know, I felt like I was in some ways ostracized from my family because of the positions I'd taken. And that's kind of come back around to where it's not really that way anymore. But then I think you were talking about boundaries in our own lives, like with ourselves. And so that's what you were referencing earlier of coming into this semester. So like for me last year, I did a master's in 3 years, which was wonderful, but I took on a lot of extra things I didn't need to take on, and it made it a lot harder than it needed to be. And my family suffered in some ways, and I suffered certainly. And so now in this PhD program, I've learned some lessons from that. And so I've said no to a lot of things, and I've even decided, for like most of this semester, I don't know if I was really studying a fraction of the time with my classmates, but that's how it seemed, because I would just take breaks in the middle of the day and take it all evening off most days, and just like I remember Julie, because we learned so much from Scott and Julie of like rest is blessed,
Yeah.
and there's these rhythms of rest.
That's our motto.
Yeah, we got that from you.
Our Julie motto, we just say a lot.
And so anyway, a lot of what you all have been saying has been resonating, and you were talking about few different things that you said reminded me of things in the book of James, because the last one was when you were talking about learning from how he comes through for us and like endurance, you might have used a different word, but it reminded me of James 1. And we count it all joy when we meet when we fall into trials of many kinds, because we know that the testing of our faith produces steadfastness. And I feel like I've just started to have that experience of and because when it says trials there, it's the same word for temptation, but it's also other kinds of trials. And so I had this experience recently where I was scheduled to preach at our church in Kentucky, and that week, it was an intense week because I had a paper due as well, this paper I was talking about, and I had just really intense temptation that week, and I remembered that verse, count it all joy when you fall into trials or temptations of many kinds. And then I also remembered the other part in James 1 where it says, do not let anyone say I'm being tempted by God, because God does not tempt anyone, nor is he tempted by evil, I'm paraphrasing somewhat. But each one is tempted when he is led astray and enticed by his own desires. The desire, when it is fully formed, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it grows up, produces death. And so death is the grandchild of desire, of illicit desire, or desire wrongly directed. But God, out of his desire, gave birth to us through the word of truth. And so we have our own desire which leads us astray, but then we have God's desire which implanted his word in us. And so we have a choice, like you were saying, of which spirit are we going to listen to. And so these spirits came and spoke this word in my mind, like you were talking about, of these temptations. Well, I know that God has given me authority over all the power of the enemy. And so I can command those spirits to go. However, they've already planted this thought in my mind. So even though the spirit goes, I still have to take captive this thought, and I still have to fight out this battle with my own desire. Because they know what buttons to push.
Oh,
So
so well. So well.
And so because the Holy Spirit is good to me, because he's always good, and he gave me like this new perspective on this, I think that was the key for me to overcome those
thoughts
temptation
that were going in your head.
Yes.
Yes.
And so if I hadn't have set the boundaries with there's so many boundaries that we set for, like, in our home we have a cover we put over our television set, like a clock she makes. She's very creative and wonderful, and that's a boundary. It's like, no, we're not going to be looking at that television all the time, but there's so many things, and if I hadn't have made the boundaries in my time, then I would have been more tired, I would have been just stressed, and I probably wouldn't have shared as well, But anyway, I just appreciate all that you all are sharing. And those are just some of the things.
It's good, Joe.
Let me share something unusual for me sharing something. I can't talk. Krista and I got a call from a lady. I got a referral from a job up on Cedar Flat Road, up in 126. And she wanted to find a handyman that was older, which I put that box where it did. And she wanted someone that knew all the trades, was familiar with all the trades, and she just had a whole plethora of remodeling to do in this house. And she sounded pretty type A, kind of like, you're gonna do this, and I want you to do this, and this is just gonna happen. And she's not the kind of customer I'm used to. When I was remodeling for my old boss, I won't go into all that. I just had customers that I could work with. They were there every day at their house. I could talk to them about what I was gonna do. This lady wanted everything emailed to her, but no contact. Well, everything about this job was color coordination, it was surfaces to redo, a lot of mechanical stuff to do, and she had to make choices on everything we were going to do. But she wasn't home. She was off doing other stuff. See you, Rick.
Hi, Rick.
And I started getting this feeling, and Krista did too, that I'm going to make a boundary with this lady. It's like, the boundary is, I don't want to work with her because stable person like I'm used to doing, because I did this for like 15 years, remodeled kitchens and room additions, and I dealt directly with people who were moving out of their rooms because I'm destroying their kitchen and putting a new one in 3 months. I've got all this time to put this beauty into their house, but I was honored, and I honored them and they honored me. Whole different relationship. This lady was like, I don't know. So I decided we decided together, she was feeling this, you get when you find people that isn't gonna go well, and you know, because you've done it so long, you get a feeling in the heart, like you get this dread, this sense of dread. I want to get relief from this dread. I got to call her until I'm not going to see her anymore. Show up.
Yeah.
And Chris said, Dad, that's the same thing I was thinking. Let's just blow out of here, get rid of that lady, and just let's not answer any phone calls, no text. So I just.
We referred her to someone else and said.
Yeah, I gave her another referral, so I didn't leave her hanging, but.
We're gonna pass on this job.
Good for you guys.
It was hard.
And I felt total peace.
It was hard.
Since then, it's peace at last. But the 2 weeks or so she was gone, that we were kind of figuring what we're going to do, but we needed her to answer all the questions on surfaces, colors. What if we do it this way? What if we, because everything had to do with redesigning stuff that was already built, and then just redoing the whole room, turning it around and changing the cabinets. But Chris had a great design in mind, because she's really good at spaces and colors, but I'm not. But it's a great job of us two together, but she was sort of like an absentee customer that had to talk on just email everything. Just email me all the plans and all your ideas.
When you go, man, do I need to show up?
And that need to show up. It will just magically happen. And I need to know all the colors, of course, but so how do you email a color, you know? Here's a swatch from Searing Williams. How does this look? Anyway, we just got relieved. I made a boundary, and I knew that was what God made me do. Because otherwise it was just kind of tearing me up. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to go there. I wanted to just exit stage left.
What's great about that is like, I had a situation almost like that. I'll make it short, but basically this guy had a bunch of dying trees, and he said he needed them down. So what about the mess? We're gonna have to trample through this area. And he said, well, just give me a quote for getting them down, and we'll deal with the mess later. So you're not gonna like it, so I get the trees down, and sure enough, it's a big mess. You know, because we just went in there one day and cut them all down, just logged this place and left them all. And it's like, well, what's it gonna cost to get them out? And I knew this guy was kind of difficult by then. And so
it's like you had to finish your job.
So I gave him a price, and it was a lot. And he said, well, what if we don't do these trees? What if we do that? And I'm just like you, I said, well, I don't want to do it. Because that becomes very difficult for me to get around this tree to get those other ones and leave that one there, and you're not going to be happy with that either. I said, so basically I said, look, it's either take it or leave it. We're doing this by email, so he has time to think about it, and he comes back and he says, well, no, I really want you to do it, but I charge so much that it's going to be worth it.
Hoping that he wouldn't be able to do the job.
It was as painful as I thought it was going to be. I think maybe I should have passed, because I hired an excavating contractor to come move logs. 3 times we had that excavator all the way loaded up, way up on the street, and he made us get it off and come and move one more thing. And I had things in my contract I was going to leave, like the non-marketable stuff over here in a pile, and I did that, and he said, no, you're not. And I said, well, it says it in my contract. This guy's an attorney. Who's going to win? So what do you think I ended up doing? I had to go move that stuff, and all the while I'm thinking, Lord, I thought I had a good boundary here, but you know, you really, if you have that churning like you're talking about, man, you really want to
pay attention to those things.
It can be hell working with people like that.
You know,
think about all the time that is spent emailing. Are you going to get paid for that?
Oh,
maybe not. What's hours?
Yeah, I already got 5 or 6 or 7 hours in the drawings and all the lists. We made 2 pages of items we were going to do, and she wanted me email all those to her. And then the last thing she said, on top of the lunch, not a very good text towards the end, she said, you are going to come Monday, and we're going to go through this, so I'll see you Monday. After I totally told her I'm not going to do it, here's another guy's number. I thought she had the power over me to say, okay, I'm going to, okay, I'll see you Monday.
Like you work for her,
She
yeah.
just wanted me there so bad, because she had no other person to go to.
Well, can you imagine?
On this whole subject of boundaries, there is a book with a chapter in it on Jesus, and it goes through all the examples in the 4 Gospels of how Jesus displayed having really good boundaries. And it's amazing. Because Jesus did, a lot of times he did have boundaries with people.
What's this book called?
It's by John Eldridge. It's called Beautiful Outlaw, and it's chapter 7.
Beautiful Outlaw.
Yeah, Beautiful Outlaw. And it's all about kind of Jesus and just like his personality and how. But yeah, chapter 7 specifically goes over the way he was upfront with people, had boundaries. Like when he went into Simon's house, he's like, Simon, like you didn't wash my feet, you didn't do this, like like he was just like it was straight up with him, even though it was something kind of small. It's like Jesus, like he goes through all these different. And there was a lot of them. I didn't realize how many there were. And he basically makes the point. It's like who in the church would actually do that? Like Jesus. People would call Jesus a prick today if he did that, And some of the examples, it's like, it kind of seems like he's being a prick right there.
When he cleansed the temple?
Oh, well, that was that's a pretty
boundaries issue.
That is a good boundary one, yeah. But it was just such a good chapter to read. Like, it was very freeing for me to see how even Jesus Christ, who's our example, modeled that very well and had to stick up and have boundaries. I mean, even the way he would come against the Pharisees, he called them hypocrites, brood of vipers, like.
But doing it publicly in the middle of the town,
Yeah.
In a culture where, that would have been, had more weight than it does
Oh, yeah.
in our Western.
Yeah, because they could lay down the law back then. Those Pharisees were almost the law in a sense.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
no joke. They would say.
Yeah. I still feel like there's like almost like prophetic message behind the sign being crashed into. I almost feel like the enemy's trying to make sure people don't like find out about this place, or the enemy might be trying to just cause people to just have things come up where they just can't make it or whatever. I don't know.
Well, one more thing happened like that. So the night before the logs were supposed to come in the log house, there was a big accident at the very bottom of the driveway. And there was lights flashing down there for hours.
Oh, yeah,
We just didn't go because there was a huge accident. And we were like, we were supposed to get the logs on a semi truck from Canada. And so we just didn't go down there, but we're like, man, we knew the spiritual atmosphere was angry and charged around us, right? And so the next day, when the logs were going to come, church family came. Everybody was kind of there because it was a big deal to get them there and unload. It was a 90,000-pound load. 97,000. And what happened was this, the front of his semi-truck jammed into the bank, and the back of it went off a cliff. And he's totally stuck. And Scott has a little tiny crane truck. And he goes and he takes a chain and he hooks him up. Jobin's there, and other pastors are there, and like random guys are there. Everybody's standing around, and like Scott starts driving this little tiny crane truck, and he's hopping, and the chain is like stretching, and everything is smoking. People are screaming, and it started to rain, and Jobin's just screaming. Everybody's screaming, and then finally I hear Jobin say out loud. I wrote it down. He goes, "Why does Satan hate your house so much?" He was like that. That's what he said. Why does Satan hate your house so much? He's screaming this out loud. And like, literally we were screaming for angels because there's no way this little crane truck is going to pull this 97,000-pound load out.
Yeah.
So he gets him kind of unstuck, and the guy's like going to go back, but he's broken his rear axle. He broke his rear axle, and so he gets back down the driveway, and this, I'm not exaggerating.
He's stuck on that first corner up there.
The storm comes. This massive storm, out of a movie storm, and trees start falling across the road. And this guy gets pinned in his truck, right beside the driveway. His son and him are pinned in this truck. And Jobin's like calling me, he's like, I need a 660 now, I need a 362. Chainsaws. So I'm like, I just had a baby in not very good shape. And I'm running to the truck, and I'm getting the biggest chainsaw chainsaw as I can, and I'm running down the road to Jarwin to give so they cut the guy out of the car. Right? And I'm like, so Satan doesn't like this.
Yeah.
Like he tried everything he could to stop.
There have been a lot of accidents in the middle of the driveway, actually.
And so that was that day, like, and today when they hit the sign, like, I've been thinking about that day and how, why would your day have to be that crazy?
Yeah.
So when they backed down the driveway, they finally got the crane, the load over to the mill. So you guys know, it was all in order. So like the logs that were on the bottom were on the top, and you just unload them, you build your house. And we had to unload the logs all over the ground.
Right?
And people were putting some little logs, like these ones, in their trunk of their car. So they put them on a trailer. Except for the lumber came with a trailer, the crane, and they put it in the mud all over the ground outside. All the logs were just in the mud. And it was a mess, right? So like I just knew, like, today when the sign got busted, I was like, some reason God does not like this place. I mean, Satan does not like this place.
Yeah. Yeah.
He does not want people to find their way.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so that actually, thinking about this whole thing, it actually reminds me of that dream I had you guys talking a long time ago. I had a dream that the enemy was really trying to destroy your property, but he couldn't, because the boundary, talking about boundaries, the boundary had somehow been like either prayed over or he had angels protecting the boundary. But in the dream, first there was a forest fire. Forest fire came through, it burnt a lot of like the surrounding area, but it came up to the edge of your property, and it only burnt across your property just a little bit in a few spots, but it didn't actually burn your garage or your barn or this. Like it never really damaged much. But then after the forest fire came through, then the enemy sent a flood, which is kind of weird because you're up on a mountain. But I just, in the dream, I saw how like waves of a lake was crashing against the edge of your property. And I know it's metaphorical, because I don't think it's literally going to happen like a forest fire. But I was talking to you guys in a dream, and I was like, man, it's chaotic out there. And you guys were like, yeah, we're barely surviving. But yeah, that's what the demon's all about. And so I think the enemy wishes he could have the legal right to come in and just destroy. He can't, but he's at least trying to hit the fringe.
Push all the boundaries we have.
Yeah.
Because as you're talking today, like, I told you, I was a person. Scott would say, you have really healthy boundaries. That's what he would say to me. You know, and then we read the book and I'm like, I need better help. Okay. I need more help. But it's only because I was going to share this with you. When I went down to get the kids, the Lord said, you have a calling on your life, but the enemy knows that. And so you call it gaslighting, but it's like the voice of the enemy knows exactly. He's trying to take me out all the time, right? And you're talking about not having fear, knowing who you are. And I'm like, yeah, I need more confidence. I need more confidence to face these things like you did in your mind, right? Which I do, but I wonder, Nate, if sometimes the battles get harder.
Oh, yeah, true.
You get me? They just get harder.
Yeah. And that's why we need to keep it easy, put burden light, all that stuff.
That's right.
I think you might have been out in the other room when I said, the Lord told me the reason why boundaries are so important to God, and He wants us to follow that in wisdom in that, is because it's supposed to be easy yoke, and the burden is supposed to be light.
Right.
If we allow all this stuff to come on and trying to save our parents and trying to, all this stuff, we just get taken out. It just becomes too heavy over time.
Right. I guess for Jen, that would apply to her work. Like, she needs to ask, like, what are my responsibilities here? What do you actually have responsibility for? You know, with that guy. You can tell him the truth, but you may not change him. Do you hear me?
Right.
You'll still feel better.
You'll still feel better.
Yeah.
There are times when all you have to do is speak the truth and you're done.
Yeah.
You know, because once that truth is out there, it can now work where it's sent to.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to kowtow to what the enemy is trying to do to you. No kowtow.
It'll
No kowtow.
confound his plans if you speak the truth many times.
And I would say, Julie, it gets harder. Yeah, the enemy gets bigger battles for you, and it gets harder. But sometimes it's just a season, like a little season.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Because you're sticking up for yourself now with your parents. and you're starting to, and that's not hard to do that, but I can see how the enemy's like, oh crap, I'm gonna lose a lot of ground here. Like, let's do everything we can right now to get her discouraged, you know? And so a lot of times when we realize, oh wait a minute, there's an area in my life where I've been enabling. And when we try to fix that, that's a lot of times when we can get attacked with like a full just assault the enemy in that moment. But there is the other side where you finally get through it, and then you become bolder. You feel lighter in your spirit, and it's easier to stick up for yourself. You do. God gives you that boldness, and yeah.
There was many times I've gone through situations, and in the moment, I was doing what I'm thinking to do. I'm doing this. This is me. And after I get through, I look back and that was him. That was him. That wasn't me.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But I have yielded what belongs to him so that he can have his way. And I go through having his way as the thinking, it's my way, and you know, I guess this is what I gotta do. And then coming out on the other side and realizing, yeah, what the word says, he's a light unto my path and a lamp to my feet.
That's right.
You know, and speaking words like that in darkness puts light on your path.
Right.
And he will, because we're honoring him by speaking his word, which he gave us to do in every situation, not just some, but every one of them. He's holy. He's holy, and he's training us for that. And it blows me away, because we think we're done because we got through a situation in A. Here comes B, and it's another situation even more severe and serious than A was.
Yeah.
But we've been prepared for B by going through A.
That's right.
And he gives us everything that we're going to need, and whatever's coming, he will always prepare us for it. We may not like it. We don't have to like it just because it's getting it ready for us. Doesn't mean we're going to like everything, but it's how we respond in the situation with what he gave us. And to speak his word, or sing his word, or dance his word, or laugh, smile, have joy in the situation, that's a hard part. That's a hard one. I don't succeed there as much as I'd like to. Truth be told. How far you've come. Look at all you. You got stories. All of you got stories. You know him and he knows you. He knows your name.
I actually did a study on the positive effects of having really good boundaries and how God can bless you because of that. And this guy had a revelation on the 7 principles in Scripture. God does a lot of things in sevens. And the principle that goes along with the servant is walking in dominion and not succumbing to the victim spirit. And so the victim spirit would be a stronghold. But so some of the positive effects of walking in dominion is you get to be life-giving for others, you bring life to others, and you teach them how to also extend that life further, and you help others gain their authority, that also, when you walk in that, God then gives you higher and higher authority in the spirit realm to root out demons. And so when you walk in this, like some people in deliverance are just very high authority. All they gotta do is say one simple word to someone that's demonized toward the spirit, and the spirit has to go.
That's right.
You know? And so yeah, being able to carry a lot of authority in the spirit realm where demons have to obey your command, that's where the positive effects of walking in, with good boundaries and authority, and your yes be yes, your no be no, and and when you walk in that a lot, then God can promote you to healing land and healing, like casting demons out of homes, and just things like that. And God's actually used me to do that with my own house. There's quite a story that happened just 2 months ago. My dad was getting ready to sell his old house. He has like 3 different homes. One he was renting out for quite a while. The people finally move out, and my dad's like, I'm like, what are you gonna do with the house then? He's like, well, I'm just gonna put it up on Redfin and sell it, you know. And I was like, you know, Dad, I was like, I've been having these dreams of that property, because I grew up there. I grew up there from 8th grade onward until high school. And I'm like, I've been having dreams that the place is like haunted. It still has demons and demonic stuff. And like, I've been getting these dreams for about 1.5 years now. And I was like, when we lived there, Dad, did you ever pray over the house at all ever? Did you ever know anything with oil? Did you ever? He's like, no. Because my dad doesn't really know how to do this stuff, you know? I'm like, well, I never did it. And I was like, did Mom ever do it? And he's just like, no. I was like, well, shoot, Dad. I was like, I think there's been demons there even before we ever did it. And so, I had like 5 or 6 different dreams. So and I journaled them all as soon as I woke up. So I got all my dreams listed up. I went to the house after we moved the people out. When the people moved out, it was vacant for about 2 weeks. And so this was just 2 months ago. So I went there, and I just kind of walked through. I had Susie, she was interceding for me, and she sent me a text of what she was sensing. And I went through every room, and with my dreams, like, the dreams were pretty detailed. Like, one room had a certain type of spirit hanging out with it. And so I just went through room to room, casting the demons out and stuff, and I prayed over the land in the house. And the enemy sent this guy. This guy called me from Texas. He came to Kairos one day, and I prayed over him at Pastor's Day, and they had him come up front. And I prayed over him, and God really touched him. And then he moved away, and he calls me, and I was like, what's this guy? And he's like, hey, is this Nick Ultimus? And I was like, yeah. He's like, hey man, how's life been? And I'm like, good. I'm like, who are you? And he's like, you probably don't remember me, but you prayed over me at your church in Springfield at one time. And I was like, oh. And I was like, well, shoot, what brings you calling me today? He's like, I don't know, I just felt like calling you. And so he starts telling me his life story. And it was getting dark on me, and I had only a little bit longer to get, and I wasn't done. I was praying over the house, I was about halfway done. And it was starting to get dark, and I wanted to get done before dark.
And this guy called you during that?
Yeah, he called me in the middle of that. And he's talking for about 25 minutes, and I finally catch myself. I'm like, whoa. Okay, wait, he's really not getting me any point right now. It's not an emergency.
It's a distraction.
Yeah, it's just a distraction. And so I kindly just said, hey, I want to hear you out, but I'm going to have to call you back. Like, can you call me tonight, like after 10 or so? He's like, oh, I'm sorry. He's like, yeah, I guess I can do that. And so I thought he would call me back. He never even called me back. But, so I went through and barely got done in time. And I finished the whole thing. And so here's the crazy thing. I prayed over the house, and I totally thought that Dad was just going to sell it to some stranger. And I'm like, why am I even doing it more? I'm like, well, maybe it's going to bless these people that move into the house, because they don't want to be moving into a home that has certain demons there and stuff. So that's might as well bless them, So I prayed over the whole house, and I even declared. I even declared like the Lord had me kind of declare certain things in the house. I went through and I was kind of praising God, doing worship songs. And I even had a prophetic word for the home, that it actually would be a home where there would be Bible group, like a Bible study or some kind of home group happening in the house in the future. All this stuff. And then so I prayed over it, and then a couple of weeks after praying over it, I get a dream of me praying over some house. And then in the dream, when I'm done praying over the house, as soon as I get done, my brother Matt is right there with his wife, Amber. He's like, oh, hey, Nate, help me grab this. I'm like, what? He hands up to me. He's like, move that into that room over there. I was like, okay. So I move it in the room, and I'm like, and you grab me another thing? And I'm helping him move into the house. And so I just got done praying over this house in the dream, and all of a sudden Matt's moving in. And so it was like a faint dream. I was like, that's kind of weird. And I find out a week after having that dream, I come to Oak Ridge and I'm talking to my dad. And Dad's like, guess what? And I was like, well, what's that? He's like, I sold the house. And I was like, well, that's fast.
I sold the house.
I was like, who'd you sell it to? He's like, Matt ended up buying it. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. And I was like, well, I had a dream. What the heck? So I thought we were going to just sell it. So my brother Matt ended up buying my dad's old house. And so it's kind of,
again?
he's my oldest brother. I have 4 brothers. So he ended up buying the house. Matt didn't know I prayed over it. Nobody did. I think I told Dad. But Matt didn't know I was even doing that. He bought the house, and then we had our Thanksgiving there. Just a few weeks back, we had our Thanksgiving there at that house I just prayed over. And so that was kind of a cool little thing to happen.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Now, did Joe and his wife live out there too?
Yeah, they live up in Oak Ridge.
Okay.
What do they have?
I want to tell something.
Sure.
So it's really short, but so I was doing the monkey bars one day, and I was showing my dad a trick. I fell off and really hurt my arm. I didn't break it, thank goodness, but it really hurt. So we went home, tried to help it, and it stopped for a while. Then it came back and it kept doing that rhythm. And then eventually, like we went to a revival, and they're praying for like energy and like when they were praying for it, my arm like was hurting them, and then it just automatically stopped in their numb.
The hurting stopped.
The hurting?
Whoa. That is awesome.
Because you went to the revival? Was you
Yeah,
going
the
there?
revival
Cool.
was
Did it come back?
his arm got healed.
That's
came back.
cool. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. That's a boom. That's a
Thanks for
boom.
sharing that. That's
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Don't never forget that.
If
Yeah,
the pain ever comes back again, just rebuke it. Just say, no pain in my arm in Jesus' name. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Okay, let's get back down the river.
All right, guys.